Okay, recording in progress. So we'll go back. And we were just talking about where we left off, which is page 30. And we're talking about respondent conditioning. So who can, I guess, tell me what, in their own words, what they got from respondent conditioning?
Pavlovian, classical conditioning.
Yeah, perfect. She said Pavlovian, classical conditioning. Erica?
Isn't respondent the reflexive part? Things that are natural to us that we respond to, like jumping into cold water, our body naturally responds to that. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, perfect. Reflex.
Yeah.
We'll tell you how to access the recordings after the meeting, but they're on my YouTube page and on the group. Yes, so respondent, we said reflexive, involuntary, illicit, remember? Oh yeah, Olga saying dog and the bell. So illicit, so the behavior is brought about. So basically elicited, brought about, the behavior is brought about by some type of antecedent stimulus. So like sun shining in my face, start twitching my eyes, or like I was telling you guys last time, sneezing, and you guys told me that it was a disorder. So sun shining in my face, every time I walk out the door, I sneeze. That's just a reflex. That's a respondent behavior. Think about it as it's a response to the bright light. It was elicited by that bright light. Cool. So then born with it. Yeah, Olga says born with it, like Lady Gaga, born this way. So then we talked about Pavlov and his stimulus pairing. So who can elaborate a little bit about Pavlov and his dog and what he did?
He paired a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus, which caused the dogs to want the food when he rung the bell.
Yes,
basically.
Perfect. And so I really like that diagram on page 31. If you guys go and look at the little diagram where it says before conditioning. So before conditioning, you had the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. So we can use the dog example instead. So the unconditioned stimulus is the bell, right? The bell means nothing to me right now. It's unconditioned. So if you're ringing a bell, I'm not gonna care. It's unconditioned. So that's my unconditioned, ringing a bell. And then the unconditioned response, or maybe I should use his example, it'll make more sense. Okay, scratch that. Unconditioned stimulus is an air puff. So they puff some air into your eye. The unconditioned response is your eye starts to blink. Okay, so then you have a neutral stimulus. Then which is a clicking sound, that's the one that means nothing to you. Sorry. The neutral stimulus means nothing to me. If somebody's making a clicking sound, it's not going to mean anything to me. So no eye blink. And then they introduce respondent conditioning. So respondent conditioning, now they're going to pair. They're going to use the stimulus-stimulus pairing procedure, which is something that you guys, like I was telling you, can use in the field all the time. So you have your, now I'm going to pair the neutral stimulus, which was the clicking that meant nothing to me before, with the air puff. So every time they puff the air into your eye, you hear a click sound. Puff and click, they're both happening at the same time. Puff, click, puff, click, puff, click. And your eye is blinking because you're getting that puff in your eye when you're at the doctor. And so they keep on doing it. They keep on presenting it to you in that way where they're like, I'm gonna check your eyes. And then they do that little puff, click, puff, click. Your eye blinks. Keep on running it. And that is the respondent conditioning. Now we're conditioning you to blink every time you hear this clicking sound, because now you've associated it with that puff in your eye. So that's your respondent conditioning part. Okay, so let's think about Pavlov and his dog. So who can tell me what the unconditioned stimulus is with the Pavlov and the dog example?
The food.
Yeah, so like let's say a steak, right? So the steak is an unconditioned stimulus. And then what is the unconditioned response? So what is the response that the dog emits when he sees the steak?
Salivating.
Yeah, perfect. Matt, Stephanie said salivating. So we put a steak in front of this dog, unconditioned stimulus, and then he starts salivating. Okay. And so in the example of Pavlov and his dog, what was the neutral stimulus?
The bell.
Yeah.
The bell.
Perfect. Erica said the bell. So the neutral stimulus was the bell. What happened before conditioning when Pavlov rang the bell? What did the dog do?
They didn't salivate.
Yeah, nothing. He doesn't care because the neutral stimulus meant nothing to him at the time, because our intervention or our stimulus pairing procedure has not been introduced yet. So basically during baseline, bring it back to the ABA, bring it back to the real world. So during baseline, when he was presenting his little bell without the steak, there was no response. So no eye blink. Okay, cool. We took a baseline and we figured out that this bell means nothing to this dog. Okay, cool. So now let's introduce our intervention. Let's go into our stimulus pairing procedure. And now we're going to present these two items together. So what are the two items that we're going to now present at the same time in our Pavlov example?
The food and the bell, right?
Yeah. So now I'm going to present the steak and the bell at the same time. Over and over, right? That's my intervention. And my RBTs are going to go start taking data. All right, Miss Selena is now pairing a highly preferred reinforcer with a vocalization. Ooh, let's see what happens now. So we're presenting steak, bell, steak, bell, steak, bell. Dog is salivating. And that is your unconditioned response. Salivating, salivating every time. All right, so then we go on the next part of our little diagram. the product of respondent conditioning. So now, when you're presenting both at the same time, you're producing the conditioned response. So what is the new conditioned response of me presenting them both at the same time? Or actually by itself. So now I'm just ringing the bell. Now I'm just ringing the bell. So what is happening to the dog? Yeah, Stephanie said salivating. So I'm just presenting the bell, which was my conditioned stimulus. And now I'm getting my conditioned response of salivating. That is your result from your respondent conditioning. So next part in our little diagram is respondent extinction. And so now they're forcing you to think backwards. And the exam may or may not ask questions that are kind of like that. So what will happen when you remove this from this? So you might see it looking something like that. So let's break it down. Respondent extinction. Now we're going to only present it by itself over and over and over and over. So what will happen when I just present the bell by itself over and over and over and over?
Would the dog stop responding to the bell? Or- They wouldn't salivate.
Yeah, so they would stop salivating. So you basically unpaired it by presenting it over and over and over in isolation. Right? Is that what everybody else got from that little diagram example? I just try to take it beyond that or put it in multiple different scenarios so that way I can make sure that my brain understands it.
Yeah, isn't that like a habituation where it keeps getting presented over time and it doesn't, or would it be an S delta if it's that way?
Yeah, exactly. And we also want to make sure that we remember that word that Matt said is habituation. So we're presenting it over and over and over in a short period of time. And so now that respondent behavior is going to diminish. Okay, that's pretty cool. Does anybody else have any other example that they could give that we could break down into a different, using that example, breaking it down and seeing how we can either use respondent conditioning or respondent extinction to either increase the behavior or decrease the behavior? Well, I'll just give you guys that example that I was telling you about last week about using stimulus pairing to increase vocalization in young learners that are not emitting vocalizations yet. So what you would do is you would take like a language sample and you would, let's say I'm going to watch this child for 1 hour and I'm going to see how many spontaneous vocals he emits in that 1 hour. And let's say it's 2. Okay, cool. He only emitted 2 in 1 hour. That's not much. So now I'm going to introduce my intervention, let's just say, and I'm going to use stimulus pairing to increase his vocalizations by pairing them with his highly preferred reinforcer. So his highly preferred reinforcer is Bubbles. So I'm going to give him access to Bubbles non-contingently, not contingent on any response. I'm just going to pair Bubbles with vocals. So I'm going to say ba, 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 and give him Bubbles at the same time. Ba, 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 Bubbles at the same time. Ba, 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 he gets Bubbles at the same time. And so while I'm implementing my intervention, I'm going to continue to take data. So let's say he's just sitting around and he's just like, ba, 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 ba. Now I already have him at 6 vocals within this short amount of time. So I'm increasing his vocalization by pairing them with that highly preferred reinforcer. And so that's using respondent conditioning to increase vocalization. And it's really, really awesome to see. So maybe you guys go and read an article about it or do some research. If you have any young learners that you want to increase vocalization, that really, really helps. But yes, that's my stimulus pairing speech there. And so now we can go into operant behavior. So we talked about respondent behavior, which was all about the antecedents and all about reflexes and things that are unlearned. And so now we're going to go into operant behavior, which is on page 32. So who can tell me a little bit about operant behavior? So we talked about Pavlov and reflexes. What is some
Learning through consequences.
Yeah, perfect. Learning through consequences. It has to be learned. Yeah, Hannah says it's a learned behavior. What about who can we contribute operant behavior to?
Skin Man.
Yes, girl. B.F. Skinner, Erica said. So B.F. Skinner is the one that comes out and is like, hey, we're talking all about antecedents and how they affect behavior, but what about the consequence? Does the consequence have any effect on behavior? And that's where operant behavior and operant conditioning comes from. Sorry. Okay, so we have Skinner and consequences, and so now we're gonna start thinking about the SRS model, which is what ABA is all about, right? ABC, SRS, so stimulus, response, stimulus, antecedent behavior, consequence. I had a light bulb moment when I realized that those two were exactly the same thing. I don't know if any of you guys have ever learned that, but SRS and ABC is the exact same thing. If anybody has a light bulb moment because of that, you're welcome.
Gracias.
Yes, I know. It like blew my mind when I realized it. SRS and ABC is the same thing. So respondent was about elicit. So now operant is about which one?
It's eliciting the response. You mean? Well, no, evoking the response? No. Elicits
Vote.
yeah, it's evoking the response.
Yes, and now we're gonna start talking about evoking the response. So in respondent behavior, some type of antecedent elicited that response or made me respond in a certain way. But now we're gonna be looking at the consequence, and the consequence is gonna evoke or emit the behavior. So we're now causing the behavior. So think about ABA using operant. So we're gonna change the behavior by letting this client encounter some type of consequence that will either increase the behavior or decrease the behavior.
Establishing or abolishing.
So since respondent behavior was unlearned behavior, what can we say about operant behavior?
It's learned.
Yes, it's learned. Perfect. Yeah, Olga, it's learned. So based off of some type of consequence that I've encountered, I have now learned that I am not going to touch that hot pan or something like that. So because I've burned my finger, I'm no longer going to touch that pan. And then you also want to know the is it plyogenic or plyogenic and ontogenic?
Phylogenic? Is that what you mean?
Phylogenic and ontogenic.
Mm-hmm.
So phylogenic means what?
Natural, we pass down from generation to generation. Inherent behaviors, inherent genes.
Yeah, so those are the ones that you were born with. What about ontogenic?
What you learned.
Yeah, so it comes from over a lifetime of experience. Perfect. And then with respondent behavior, we talked about habituation. So we presented over a short period of time to elicit the response. And what about operant behavior?
Extinction.
Adaptation.
Is
So-
that the similar to habitation for operant behaviors?
Yeah, habituation.
No,
And
I know habituation. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's see, where does it tell us in the book, the definition? I wonder if there's a better adaptation. Does it tell us somewhere? Who wants to define adaptation? Reductions in responding evoked by an antecedent stimulus over repeated or prolonged presentation.
Do you know what page that's on?
I got that from my notes, so that's why I was seeing if Cooper had a better adaptation definition. Well, okay, maybe we'll just keep on reading and then we'll get a better
I'm sorry, what was the question? I missed that last part. What's the question about adaptation?
adaptation. We want a better we want a definition from Cooper.
Oh.
Or
I'm not good at that.
or I guess anybody.
It's not even in the glossary in my Cooper book.
Oh, okay.
And I just
Well-
looked at the definitions. It's not in that either. So
Okay.
might
well
not be in
then-
his book.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe you guys don't even need to know that word. Okay, so operant behavior is selected by its consequences. Unlike respondent behavior, whose topography and basic functions are predetermined, operant behavior can take a virtually unlimited range of forms. Consequences only affect future behavior. Consequence select response class, not individual responses. Immediate consequences have the greatest effect. That is the most true and important thing that I've ever heard. So immediate consequences have the greatest effect. Who can tell me why or what I'm talking about? Like, why does your consequence have to be immediately following the behavior?
If your consequence doesn't immediately follow the behavior, then there's no correlation between the actual consequence and the behavior that you elicited. So in order to
Exactly.
make sure that you pair the consequence with the exact behavior, you're supposed to provide the consequence within 3 seconds.
Yeah, immediately. Immediately is the most effective, because if you do it like 10 minutes later, they're not going to understand your contingency. And April said you might accidentally be reinforcing something else. That is like the most perfect and true and raw thing that I've ever heard, especially like me in the field. I see this all the time. I'll give you guys like a real life example. So for example, let's say we're potty training, and every time the client voids in the potty, we're reinforcing him with an edible, let's just say. So let's say it's his favorite gummy bear. So every time he voids, you have to put on a glove, get that little gummy bear and pop it in his mouth right at the moment of the void. And the reason why is so that you can be reinforcing the behavior of him voiding in the potty. That's so important. And you might see, like, for example, maybe an RBT that isn't very fluent in ABA, and they're like, oh, whatever, he pottied in the toilet, but then she's like, oh, I forgot to give him the gummy. Oh, I'll just wait until he comes out of the stall and finishes washing his hands. So he is like voided in the toilet. He pulled up his pants. He walked out of the stall, and now he's washing his hands. And then she gives him the gummy and was like, oh, hey, great job peeping in the potty. Who can tell me what's wrong with that picture, or what could possibly happen in that situation?
Well, you delayed the reinforcement, so it's going to lose its value.
Yeah, so what do you think she
You
ran?
delayed the reinforcement. I'll delay the reinforcement, so they paired a stimulus to, they paired that a different stimulus to that reinforcement. It could be a gesture or look, right?
Yeah, they took way too long. So they might be reinforcing something else. So what do you think is what do you think they're reinforcing, since he just finished washing his hands?
Washing his hands.
Yeah, washing his hands, says Jen and Erica. Yeah, you just reinforced him washing his hands, which is not what we were working on. So now guess what happened to little baby? He's so confused. He's like, when am I gonna get this gummy? Like, when I go in the potty, when I wash my hands, other lady forgot and gave it to me when I was walking in the hallway. So now it's like your intervention is just completely gone down the drain. And I've seen this happen in real life. That's why I'm so like passionate about this subject of immediacy and reinforcement and how effective it is. Because let's say one therapist is following the protocol and they are giving him the gummy immediately following the target response, but then the other one is all wishy-washy, and she gives him 5 gummies every time he walks out of the bathroom. And so then next time somebody comes in and he starts having a meltdown when he goes into the potty, and he's like, I want gummy bear, I want gummy bear. And you're like, you only get gummy bears when you pee pee in the potty, not just when we walk in the potty. And so now he's just associated the gummy with like some completely other irrelevant behavior that you weren't targeting. So always when you read these things, or when you read the exam, think about it in that way. Like, why would immediacy be so, or it might ask you something like, I don't know, somebody word it nicely for me the way a question would, like, what is the most effective time of reinforcement delivery? Who can answer it? Yeah, Hannah said another good example is when you, yes, Lydia, thank you, immediately. Hannah says another good example of this is when you are prompting a client. If you wait too long to prompt the client, then the prompt was basically pointless. Yeah, because they don't know like what the SD was. Like you have to deliver the prompt or the response immediately following the behavior so that you either increase or decrease the behavior. Okay. All right, so after it talks about operant conditioning, it goes into reinforcement and how it occurs immediately. And then it goes into positive and negative reinforcement. Oh my gosh, you guys, I get really passionate about this subject. So maybe someone else should talk about these. Okay, I'm trying to figure out a way to explain it nicely. How can I share the whiteboard? Does everybody see my background on my whiteboard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, you guys, I get really into this. So we can talk about reinforcement all day long, but it's up to you guys. You can tell me to be quiet at any moment. Okay, so for me, in my brain, this is the way my brain works. So on one side, or let's type it so it looks nice. On one side, I have reinforcement. This is my brain, okay? So we are in Selena's brain. On the other side, we have, oh no. On the other side, we have punishment. Basic stuff, right? So who can tell me what is reinforcement? We're using it.
Increasing behavior.
Perfect. Yes, that is what I was looking for. So for reinforcement, we're going to think about trying to increase a behavior. Okay. On the other side, who can tell me what we think about for punishment? What is punishment?
Decrease behavior.
Perfect. Punishment, we're going to be decreasing a behavior. All right. So within those two, you have two different sides. So who wants to tell me the two?
Positive and negative.
Perfect, Hannah. We have positive. Oh, I guess I should have wrote it nicely too. We have positive and negative. So what I always tell people is delete what you knew before ABA. So before ABA, positive, negative, delete the definition of that. So in the regular world, positive and negative means good and bad, right? To a lot of people. To us, it does not. Who can tell me what positive and negative means to us?
Positive, something added.
Positive increasing numbers, negative decreasing numbers.
I heard somebody say positive is something is added. That is correct. So for positive, something's going to be added. And so negative, something is going to be,
Removed.
Something taken away or
yeah, subtracted, right? Or taken away. So positive, we're going to add something. Negative, we're going to take something away. So same thing on both sides. So you have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive punishment and negative punishment. So positive reinforcement, we're going to use it to increase a behavior. Negative reinforcement, we're going to use it to increase a behavior. Positive punishment, we're going to use to decrease a behavior. And negative punishment, we're also going to use to decrease a behavior. So let's first talk about positive reinforcement, which should be your number one go-to thing to do first, because research shows that positive reinforcement is one of the most effective ways to teach a skill, right? Because we want to increase something.
What's the point?
So who can tell me what positive reinforcement is?
Positive reinforcement is when you're adding in a stimuli, and over time, the addition of that stimuli shows an increase of the desired behavior.
That was beautiful, Hannah. You said it so behaviorally. Your supervisor should be so proud of you.
Thanks.
Yes, positive reinforcement. We are adding a stimulus to the environment in order to increase a behavior. I'm adding a wanted stimulus is the most important part. It has to be something somebody actually wants. You can't just give me, I don't know, something of no value to me, like some new brake pads. I don't even know how to put them on. I mean, maybe that's nice of you, but it's not reinforcing to me. Like, I'm not gonna go to work for new brake pads if I didn't even need any brakes, you know, like it doesn't make any sense. So in order for it to be reinforcing, in order for you to increase my behavior, it has to be a wanted stimulus. So adding some type of wanted stimulus to the environment to increase the behavior. All right, that was so beautifully put, Hannah. Who can tell me the definition of negative reinforcement?
For negative reinforcement, you're taking away an aversive stimuli that again increases the likelihood of the behavior to occur over time.
Yes, and that's like the hardest one for people in the exam. Negative reinforcement is so confusing to people. They do not understand it because I'll explain it in an example, but let's just talk about the definition. So negative reinforcement is the removal of an aversive stimulus in order to increase the behavior. So in order for it to be reinforcing, you have to be in some type of unwanted situation, right? So who can tell me some type of unwanted situation that somebody might possibly want to get out of?
Loud music.
Loud music, yeah, perfect.
A math worksheet.
Yeah, perfect. Too much work. You're making me work too much and that's way too hard. I don't want to do that. So math worksheet, loud noise. So how can we use negative reinforcement in that situation? What would an example of negative reinforcement be?
Turning down the music or removing the worksheet.
Yeah, exactly. So turning down the music, or leaving the room because I don't like that song, or in the worksheet situation, tearing it up into pieces. Whew, that was negatively reinforcing to me because now I don't have to look at it. So getting rid of that aversive stimulus, that is your negative reinforcement. So whenever I think about negative reinforcement, think about like hashtag relief. Oh, thank God, now I don't have to do that ever again. That's negative reinforcement. But within negative reinforcement, you have two types. Who can tell me the two types within negative reinforcement? Oh my gosh, I can't click on it. Okay, sorry. There's avoidance and escape. What are the differences between avoidance and escape?
Avoidance is like avoiding the situation altogether, and escape is like getting out of it once you're in it.
Perfect, yes. So avoidance, I'm just gonna avoid that intersection because I know that that policeman is always posted up there and I love to speed. So I'm just gonna avoid that intersection every single morning. That's avoidance. What about escape? Like she said, is I have to be already in the situation and then just bolt out of the room. So I'm the type of person where I don't really like to fight. Like I don't really like confrontation too much. So once like if I'm in an argument with my boyfriend or something and it's starting to make my blood boil, I'm like, okay, hashtag negative reinforcement, escape this situation, and I'm just gonna walk away before I do something crazy. So you have to already be in the situation and then be like, I'm out of here. So that's the difference between escape and avoidance in case any questions like that come up. So avoidance is I'm just avoiding it because I know I'm not gonna like it. It's gonna be unpleasant. Or escape, I'm already in it and I just don't wanna be a part of it. Okay, I hope that helped some people. So you guys are still in the diagram that's in my brain. So let's talk about positive punishment now. So positive punishment is, who can tell me? So based off of what we said about positive reinforcement, just give me the opposite.
You're adding something to decrease the behavior. For example, maybe you spank a child.
Yeah,
The addition of that spanking is to decrease the behavior.
yes,
You know?
perfect. What about like when we talked about positive reinforcement, it has to actually be something they want. So what do you think over here in positive punishment? Do you think it's a wanted or an unwanted stimulus that we're adding?
It's unwanted.
Yeah, it's aversive. I don't want a spanking. I don't want to be yelled at. Who can give me another example of adding something to decrease a behavior? Something like, think about your kids. What is something that they don't want or that you would do, something you would add to their environment to hopefully decrease some type of unwanted behavior? So we said a spanking, we said yelling. What else? Anybody?
Maybe a reprimand. If you maybe give them a reminder to do their chore and they do their chore? Would that be considered a
A reprimand would have to be a consequence. So like it would have to be following the behavior. So the reprimand would have to be after. So since he didn't do his chores, you're gonna yell at him. Insulting, yeah. Vincentia said insulting, and Lydia said adding extra chores. That's another one. So like, oh, because you called your sister a bee, now you have to scrub the toilet with the toothbrush, which is not part of his typical daily chores. So he's like, oh, gross, never doing that again, because I don't want to have to scrub the toilet with the toothbrush or whatever the case may be. I'm just giving crazy examples so you guys can understand. But yeah, perfect. What about negative punishment?
Taking away reinforcing stimulus that will decrease the behavior.
Yeah, so taking something wanted, so taking away a wanted stimulus to decrease the behavior. So who can think about an example of like with their kids or with their clients of some type of negative punishment?
Taking away their cell
Like-
phones.
Yeah, I was gonna say take away their toy.
Yeah, taking away a toy, taking away their cell phone, taking away their recess privileges because they actually really love recess. But I always give the example of timeout and how people always, or not always, sometimes they may use it incorrectly, right? So let's say you're sitting at circle time, you have two students and one of them punches the other one because he's highly dyslexic, he hates reading. And teacher is like, okay guys, it's reading time. So when she gives that SD, it's reading time, he punches his friend because every time he punches his friend, teacher says, you're out of here, you're going to the principal's office. So basically like timeout, right? Timeout, go to the principal's office. So what do you think is going to happen to that behavior? Because now he knows that he can escape. Every time teacher says it's reading time, all I have to do is punch this kid and then I get to go to the principal's office. So what did that do instead?
It increased his behavior
Mm-hmm.
to escape.
Yeah, the behavior will increase to avoid reading time. Perfect. Future frequency of behavior decreases and something is taken away. So Olga's asking about future frequency of behavior decreases and something taken away. Taking an aspirin to get rid of a headache, Olga, that is negative reinforcement. Who can tell me why taking an aspirin is negative reinforcement?
Because you're taking it in order to escape the headache.
It's relief.
You're removing that aversive stimulus.
Yes, perfect. It's hashtag relief. So now you reinforce the behavior of taking an aspirin. So now in the future, I'm going to take an aspirin because it gave me that hashtag relief that I was searching for. So Olga, I don't know if you were connecting negative punishment with the aspirin, but it's actually negative reinforcement.
What I get confused about is it the future of the actual, the behavior being taking the aspirin or the behavior of the headache? That's why that one always confuses me.
Oh, I love that you asked that question. It's already 7:36, but I'm
Sorry.
gonna explain this and then I'll let you guys go. Because I love when people try to fight me about the aspirin example. And then I explain it to them and they're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So all you have to do in these situations, and I'm going to tell you that when I took my BCBA exam, on my whiteboard, I ABC'd everything. Like if it didn't make sense to me, I ABC'd it, and that will save your life. So let's ABC this aspirin situation. So what is the antecedent? Can someone tell me? I'm gonna take an aspirin because what?
A headache.
Headache.
Yeah,
Or
so
pain.
your antecedents are always going to be SDs or MOs. And in this situation, our SD or our MO, our motivation, is that we have a headache.
Pain.
Yeah, we'll say, ouch, my head hurts. Okay, so that's my antecedent, ouch, my head hurts. So what's my behavior? What was my response?
Take aspirin.
And this is where I'm telling you guys that ABC and SRS is the same thing. And this is what's going to save your life, is being able to use your ABC SRS model. Okay, so my response is
Take aspirin.
take aspirin. Yes. So my behavior or my antecedent, my MO is, ow, my head hurts. My response is, oh, let me take this aspirin that I just found. And then what is my consequence?
Relief. Or headache gone.
Yeah, so I put no mo headache. No mo headache. And so what did that do to my behavior of taking an aspirin?
Increase.
Yeah. So
Future.
now I increase likelihood of taking aspirin in the presence of a headache. So when you are answering these weird questions about reinforcement and punishment, and is it positive, is it negative, you always want to break it into ABC and look at what letter for your answer.
The consequence.
Yeah, you always want to look at the consequence. So what happened in the end? Did I increase the behavior or did I decrease the behavior?
And you mean future, right? Future.
Yeah,
right?
did I increase the future likelihood or did I decrease the future likelihood of the behavior occurring?
Which is of taking the aspirin, right? Okay.
Yes. Perfect. And we can break everything down like that. Like we could sit here all day long and break everything into ABC. And that way we can figure out what is it? Are we using reinforcement or are we using punishment? And then once you figure out if it's reinforcement and punishment, then you think, are we adding some type of stimulus or are we removing a aversive stimulus? So anytime you remove an aversive stimulus, so minus some type of aversive, it's always going to, your answer is going to be negative reinforcement.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up question?
Sure.
So what would you say to the people that argue or try to say like, well, you're adding the aspirin because you're taking it. So you're adding aspirin to the situation. So therefore it would be positive reinforcement. Because I've heard that argument.
So adding aspirin is the behavior. It's not your consequence. So I would tell them to break it into ABC and to look at the
Okay.
consequence. And I would say, what is the result of adding an aspirin? Not what are you doing with the aspirin?
Right.
Because what you're doing with the aspirin is your behavior. Me taking the aspirin is my behavior. It's not the consequence of my behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah, I would just tell them that taking the aspirin is my behavior. It's not the consequence.
It's not.
I want to know what the consequence was. Am I going to take the aspirin again or am I not? What would happen if I took the aspirin and it didn't take away the headache? Then it would become
Punishment?
yeah, it would become punishment. So now
Because that behavior would decrease.
yeah, in the presence of an aspirin, in the presence of a headache, am I gonna take an aspirin?
Right.
No, I'll probably take an Advil or something else.
So don't they have to say though in the question that that they did something to increase it in the future, right? Because if it just doesn't mention that, then there's not enough information, right? I mean, we've come across questions like that.
Yes, that's always like you want to, as a behavior analyst, you want to know what the future, what happens to the future likelihood of the behavior. But sometimes if that isn't an answer, like it's like not enough information, then they might make you use like your own like reasoning. Because I've seen them kind of do it like that, where not enough information is not an answer. So then you have to like think about it. But that might be the RBT exam. Or I might just be confusing you guys. But yeah, if it doesn't tell you about what happens in the future, then you can't really answer that question. You don't know if you were reinforcing it or punishing it.
Okay.
Let me stop recording. If I know how.